All right, I guess we might as well get started. So I'm Roger Rail. I'm chair of CARD and chair of Saturday for Safe Water. And for this first part, we go around and we do introductions. There's a couple new people here, so and then we'll go into the agenda. So
I'm Shauna Milkey. I'm an Ann Arbor resident and the secretary for CARD.
Bob Bailey, Scioto resident.
Kathy Knoll, Scioto Township trustee.
Russo, University of Michigan, faculty member.
Vince Russo, CARD board member and Serial Club board member.
I'm Mackenzie King. I'm a University of Michigan student.
Elizabeth Collins, I'm a resident on Porter Ave, and I'm happy to be here.
Kristen Schweikofer, I'm the environmental health director with Washtenaw County Health Department.
Kent Martinez-Grants, I'm county commissioner, I'm just standing up, so I'm didn't know.
Mike Moran, Ann Arbor Township Supervisor, CARD Vice Chair.
I'm Matt Nod, the environmental coordinator for the city of Ann Arbor.
And a couple in the back here.
Jim Schultz, concerned citizen.
Bryce Kelly, Scioto Township Manager.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the minutes from our November meeting, and I move that the board, this is a vote for the board, that the board approve the minutes from the November meeting. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No?
Thanks for doing it.
Okay, sure,
Yeah.
thanks. Okay.
Anybody need an agenda? Didn't you?
Oh, yeah, there's a couple. Yeah, Bryce. And as far as DEQ updates, well, the first bullet item, maybe Roger could talk about a little bit, but briefly, why don't I go into the second one? Dan Hamill sent out the results of some surface. Dan Hamill is the project manager from DEQ. He sent out some results from surface water sampling that he had mentioned in the last meeting. And there are 9 sites around the west side of Ann Arbor. 2 of them were non-detect, and the 7 of them had readings between 1 and 4 parts per billion. So I'm not sure what the significance of that is.
Where were they again?
I didn't get to review it yet.
Yeah, okay. There were 9 sites, surface water sampling.
I could point them out if you read them slowly.
Okay. Unnamed Tributary at Jackson,
So that'd be here.
and that was 1.9 parts per billion.
Yeah, that's,
Well, actually, it's not there. It's a little further up. It'd be here
Yeah,
at Jackson Road.
okay.
well, the bulk of that is the
Discharge.
Is the discharge. And the next 2 or 3 are
Yeah.
going up that stream.
But that's 2 tributaries that come together before that sample point.
Yeah.
And it's also after the artesian well, which is, got some 2-digit parts per billion.
Okay, the second site is Little Lake,
Right, so that, in the lake, I presume it's, somewhere in the lake.
and that had a reading of 1.6 parts per billion.
Right.
The third site is Smith Pond West.
Okay, so these are the 2 peat mining lakes. So this is the west one here.
And that had a reading of 1.0. And Smith Pond East was non-detect.
Which is kind of curious. You would think that this pond would have a higher concentration than this pond, because the flow is east to west.
But where's the discharge again?
Discharge is way up here.
Right, so it's not an area that's.
It's not the discharge.
It's
It's what's coming from the third sister lake.
Okay.
Now, it may be, see how this tributary kind of skirts this pond? So it doesn't really run through the pond. If they sample here, they may get higher than if they sampled, say, down here. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
What's that pond name?
So Smith Pond
Smith?
West and
Yeah.
Smith Pond
Okay.
East.
Yeah, they're also in the past called peat mining lakes, because that's how they got made.
Right, looks
They
like.
dug out the peat and the water filled it in.
Right.
What is it called, Smith now, because it's the Smith
It's a
property?
Smith, old Smith property.
And those are
right?
the folks that have bought many of the Paul properties.
Yeah, that's the other wrinkle on that. That we've talked about before. Go ahead.
Okay, the next one is unnamed tributary outfall.
Okay, so that would be here. They're calling this all one unnamed tributary, so it'd be right here where it meets Honey Creek,
And that was 1.6.
which was the same as it was here. Not surprising.
Okay.
Next is Arbor Landings Pond.
Now, Arbor Landings, I believe, is this, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's this guy here. This
Yeah.
apartment
Dexter
complex here,
and Wagner, yes, and that was non-detect.
which is a good thing, because if it was
Should be all
detected there.
stormwater runoff
Right,
anyway.
yeah. It's perched water, basically. It doesn't
Should
go very
be.
deep.
Okay, so, that, next is Third Sister Lake, and that is the 4.1 parts per billion reading.
Which is a little higher than I would expect.
Is that the Lincoln
So
704?
third is what?
Yep.
4.1.
Wow.
Yeah, and for reference, the drinking water criterion is 7.2, probably most people know that, so this is kind of approaching it. Next is the unnamed tributary at Park.
All right, so that's the southern tributary that comes out of the Third Sister Lake, goes through the Smith Ponds, goes through Polo Fields, and then joins up with the discharge tributary, and they set at Park Road, so that's right here at Park Road.
Okay, and that was 2.0.
Yeah, that's kind of surprising, actually.
Well, if Third Sister Lake's at 4, you know, and that's feeding in.
Yeah, but it was 1 back here. Right?
Yeah,
The West
that's
Pond
true.
was 1. So-
What's their error ratio though, is it plus or minus a half?
Well, who knows? You know, there could be other venting that's going on here, because that's pretty close to the artesian wells here. These artesian wells on this side. It's not so hilly over here, but you don't know if there's some seeps that could be affecting the creek somewhere in between. That's an interesting result, that it's higher here
Is that
than
it?
upstream.
And then one more site, Honey Creek at Dexter,
Okay, so that's way down here.
Right there.
and that was 1.2 parts per billion.
Yeah, so 1.6 here and 1.2 here. There's no intervening other tributaries. So there could be some degradation between here and there. Yeah,
Do you know how these compare to prior results?
I don't think
Not
we've
yet.
had a lot of surface water.
there's been a
resistance.
handful of them, but I'll have to, once I get the full information, and this is not part of typically part of the database in the past. Dan is starting to put it in, Dan from DEQ is starting to put it in the database. But unless he puts the old stuff in too, then it's kind of hard to do compares, you know, we have to fill in the old gaps at some point.
And there's a study that the USGS did of Honey Creek. You may not know about it, but they looked at gaining and losing sections, so where the surface water might be going into the ground and where groundwater might be getting to the surface, and that started to look at that dynamic. We helped fund it, the city, with USGS, so I've got it. Roger, I'm sure, has it, but if anybody's interested in that kind of creek dynamic, we have this. It's got to be 12. It's you know, it's in my time at the city, but just reminding folks.
Yeah, it was basically, again, a one-shot study.
And the conclusion was?
There's both losing and gaining parts of the street, depending on season.
Those ways,
Probably
right.
seasonal too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just one season. I mean, it was just 1 year that we looked at, so
Gives you an idea.
yeah.
So these results are gonna be posted on the DEQ website, they just got back.
So I just got a note from Dan Hamill, he's interested in doing near-surface water tests at West Park. So he had indicated he'd like some help. I said I would come out and help him. So I did send a note to Jennifer Lawson yesterday about doing a test at West Park and, just pop one of the grates over the swirl concentrator. They have a pole, they said they could go down and just sample it from the surface.
Just coordinate with Jen.
Yeah. So I sent her a note yesterday, and I had talked to her earlier, and a couple months ago. She said, "Hey, no problem. I'd be fine. No problem doing the test. Not that complicated, and it's it's a good thing to do now, and we'll see what we get, and maybe we'll. I'd like to see more tests done, Dan Bicknell was saying, hey, they should have permanent wells, and there's just enough exposure issues that 1,000 part per billion and more, that's upstream. Even 1,900 is not as high a number as you might think. Could go up to 2,800 legally through the city. Anyway, so I'll let you know what.
Okay, yeah, great, well, because that's following up, he did commit to doing that at the last meeting about, at least at West Park.
It's been a year and a half, so glad they're
Well,
feeling some, effort, on our part to keep them doing this stuff.
So-
They're not gonna let up.
is that the Allen Creek drain?
Yeah,
I turned on the drain level here, and so that there's a couple drains that come together right in the middle,
I would like to do a test
right in the middle of the.
right here. There's a grate, there's like a path that goes along this path here. And right in here is our swirl concentrators that when the city redid West Park, they put in a bunch of stormwater components. The watershed group was, asking for that, and they, got a grant. And there's always water running underneath that grate, even in a drought. And I'm told that there's groundwater capture upstream where it would have undermined the road or undermined houses or whatever. So they just went ahead and, when they put that pipe in, they tapped in all these seeps. And so there's water running all the time. There's just several like that in the city. There's one down by Fingerly's, always got raw water running through it. So I thought it would be a good idea to test that. It's upstream of, like an easy test.
Yeah, and that's in the area here where the groundwater is close to the surface.
Yep. So who did that map, Roger, with the groundwater?
This one,
Yeah, was that?
the company did it in 2006 and 2007. And then I just mashed it up on Google Earth. It takes a while because I have to retrace the outline.
Well, thanks for doing it.
Takes a while. It'd be so much easier if they gave us what's, a PDF that's geocoded, and we could just pop it in by layer. But then that would free me up to do other things.
So I was gonna say, it leaves you too much time on your hands.
Then I could actually find other things to complain about, right?
All right, well, and maybe, can we go back up to the first bullet? So
Yeah, that's good segue, because turns out the company is having a planned maintenance shutdown of their discharge, and I guess of the treatment and everything, to do preventive maintenance and make some upgrades or something. Again, no details on the plan, it's just that they're gonna be shutting down from today through Saturday, I think it is?
The 8th,
5th through the 9th?
4th through
Yeah,
the
4th to the
8th,
8th, I thought
that's
it
what
was
was in the article,
Oh, yeah.
Monday through Friday, yeah.
Okay. So, today I emailed Dan Hammond and said, you really should get out there and and take some pictures of the discharge point and what the tributary looks like when there's no water in it. Because I don't think they have their own photos of that. I've got several from past years, with me standing in the tributary because it's dry. That was before they put up their no trespassing signs, and now they have it all fenced in, I guess. And then I blasted that out to the core group, and Matt responded saying, yeah, how about a low flow sample? Sample the water while it's at low flow.
Good idea.
And Dan is gonna be out there tomorrow, so it sounds like he's gonna do it. So, I mean, it's good that he can get in there and do that, because otherwise we just have to fly a drone over to get pictures of it. Yeah.
And hopefully he'll recover from the surgery or before his surgery or.
Dan?
Dan Hamill. I was thinking Dan, but no.
Oh, but Dan Bicknell, that's why he's probably.
He's got something going on?
We don't know what.
Oh.
Medical.
Anyway, so, that's at least something, you know, while it's in low flow, while it's in no discharge, we want to have some characterization of the creek and how much dioxane is in the creek when there's no flow. Because my contention is, when you discharge in here, the discharge point is like right about here. This tributary backs up all the way back to the marshy area. Back here, where there's some really high concentrations back here. Probably not the highest one. And it's funny they didn't do a sample here, tributary, because this would tell you, you know, before and after, during discharge and when there's no discharge, how much dioxane is getting into the tributary here. But with that high water in the backwash all the way back to this point, that it creates a potentiometric head here that could be flushing more dioxane down to the underlying aquifers. And if you look closely at these wells, there's no deep wells, even intermediate wells in this area. So we don't know how much dioxane is going through the clay layers, around the clay layers, leaking from the tributary down to the underlying aquifers. Anyway, let's go on to the next item.
Okay.
Let's just, any questions on that before we move on? Okay. So what's next? Review of EPA, oh, this is where the meat of the thing's going to be. So Dan Bicknell created a petitioner's preliminary response to the EPA's preliminary analysis and pointed out some of the omissions by the DEQ. And it's important to make it clear that he wasn't representing CARB in that, he was representing the petitioners, and he got some feedback on that. But CARB, we still want to have our own formal response to this, and we've started making comments on the PA and the attachments to the PA, and which documents should have been as attachments to the PA, and tracing down some other leads that came out of the attachments that were in the PA. Because there were some documents in there I had not seen. Not surprising, I guess, because before I got involved, some of them, but there were some interesting revelations in there. So that's the next point where, and that's a link on the electronic version, so you can click on that and see what the draft comments are so far on the PA itself, and then the second item on the PA attachments. I mean, there's things in there, for instance, there was a Gelman employee who, it was an email or something, I don't know if it was internal or to the DEQ, but back in like 1980 or somewhere in that time frame said, must have been more like 81, but where the dioxane is clearly the major concern. Well, if you look back at the prior documents, there's nothing that said there's high levels of dioxane yet. There hadn't been found in any wells off-site yet. how did he know to make that statement? Where are the documents that he obviously saw to cause him to make that statement? So that's one of the holes that we're gonna ask about. Guess I could bring that up.
Well, what's the plan for responding to the preliminary assessment?
Okay, what I'm doing, I'll bring those up here so we can see it.
Well, one thing they actually asked for, asked CARD to suggest things they'd like to see in the quarterly report from the DEQ.
Yeah, that's a minor part as far as I'm concerned.
Depends on what the items we add.
More importantly is to establish the record of here's what we know about the site's history. You know, it's funny, they had items in the attachments like the caretaker's blog mentioning somebody ice fishing on the Third Sister Lake. And yet they didn't include like the more important reports that were available in the blog and things like that. So I actually went through the blog and found some things that piqued my interest. In particular, the caretaker looked like she thought she was drinking dioxane from one of the older wells. And I clarified with the university that no, that's not the case. And following up on that, I've got a commitment from Kathleen McDonald at the university to provide all of the information the university has, because they do their own sampling in addition to split sampling with the company. And they're going to share that data set going forward. They've got to compile the stuff yet for December, but then in a couple of weeks I'll have that shared.
Who's Kathleen?
She's the new person in charge. It's been the last couple of CARD meetings.
Kathleen McDonald, does that name sound?
No, is she like at the Third Sister? I mean, she's.
No, there's nobody as caretaker anymore.
Oh, no, she works at U of M.
She's
an
the
engineer.
head of the occupational health and or whatever they
I see.
reorganized into.
That's
now.
what I was checking.
Yeah.
EHS.
She should be on the list, right?
Yeah, her name is on the list. But the testing that U of M does is just at Saginaw Forest, right? They don't test anywhere
So U of M,
else.
No, they don't test outside the Saginaw Forest, but they do test areas that the company doesn't test, and maybe at a frequency the company doesn't test.
and they have ongoing, they had ongoing tests of the water.
Yes.
Well, Nancy Scheffler talked to the caretaker about that.
Back when there was a caretaker.
Yeah, and they thought that the numbers that they got back were low when they drank.
Yeah, one of the things they haven't done, apparently, is compared their split sample with the company's split sample.
Yeah.
So I said, well, once we get yours, I'll do that for you, so we can, you know, because it's always instructive to compare to see if the split samples are close to each other or not.
So who does U of M split with? The DEQ
Yeah.
then?
Well,
Okay.
no, company, I
Oh,
guess.
I see.
Before it gets to the DEQ.
Mhm.
If it's on the U of M property, I don't know if all we'll know when we get their data,
Okay.
whether they split all samples. It's interesting though that she just sent let me pull it up here. She sent an image of where she thought the wells were on Saginaw Forest property. So here's where she thinks the wells are. But the interesting thing is that if I turn on these splits and a couple other things here. Splits. All right, so here's the Gelman property that was split. And it turns out this line here across the top is parallel. I mean, this extends into the Saginaw Forest property. So if you go straight across, so she had this well, MW37, as one of their wells. But she didn't have these two guys.
So is the point that we're going to?
So either these are misplaced by the database that Paul shares with the state, or the university doesn't know that there's actually a monitoring well and a purge well on their property.
Possible.
Either case, it's not good.
Right.
Either they're not where they say they are, or they're on the university property, the university doesn't know it.
So there's also a well at the house.
Oh, no,
By sampling.
no, not anymore. I mean, there's 3 wells that were put in. There was the, number 1 was the one, and that's still used as a monitoring well. And then number 2, they put in, and it had dioxane right away, so they never used it as a well, as drinking water well. And then number 3 was put in, which I don't have here because they took it off the database even, but it's right around the same area. And that never got installed as a well even, so they plugged it right away. Then they went out to the Liberty Road and put in the 4th well. And that's the one they've been using for drinking water. You know, there's a pipe that goes back to the cabin whenever, yeah, so it's all non-detect. So the caretaker was not drinking the well after the 4th one was put in, the water there. Now, there are some other wells in the area. There's MW78, which is a shallower well. It only goes down, what, 60-some feet. And then there's MW125, which, of course, does go deeper. This one, the caretaker wrote about. She was watching them drill it, and they hit a big boulder, and so they stopped. They didn't go all the way to bedrock. So this, there could be dioxane even deeper than what this says. Well, this, they actually on the screen this, it's 70, but the well goes much deeper than that. If you look at the well log for this. Then of course there's some other monitoring wells further down and further west that are still on Saginaw Forest. And there was this one that never got used. Never got location D, there was a well never put in there. It's kind of interesting, because that was a big well, it was like 8 or 6 or 8 inch well that they put in and immediately abandoned. MW37 is one of the higher concentrations that abruptly dropped in 2000. It's kind of interesting. But these 2 are the concern right now, is that, okay, do you know that these are 2 wells on your property?
So what is, I guess I'm trying to figure out where we're going with this discussion. You're trying to identify wells that are missing from the report? Is that?
Well, yeah, either they're missing as to which parcel they're on, or they're, you know, the data's wrong.
I think we need a sort of a systematic way to approach how to deal with the report.
Yeah, and I'm getting to that. So, one of the other things I noticed in the reviews was reference to drain fields. And it's interesting that nobody looked at where the drain fields were in all these years. Until I did. So I looked at went to the county system and got what available permits there were for the drain fields and mashed those up in Google Earth. So those are drain fields. I'm having trouble with my eyes today, so bear with me. So I found some detailed maps of where the drain fields were. So here's the main drain field has been over the years.
The drain field for what?
For their
Septic field.
For their septic field, yeah. It's interesting that that's like right east of the pond, the big 3 million gallon pond. And now this should not have been used for any industrial waste. This should have only been used for, you know, normal stuff from the toilets and stuff, right?
So Roger, explain the significance of this.
I'm gonna show you. Keep in mind that they had more than one drain field here. They revised it. One of the questions is, when you rehab a drain field, what do you do with the soils when you move them around? You just put them back in place, you haul them off someplace?
Usually you need to expand it, so you wouldn't disturb the soils, you'd either expand it to
Just
make it
move the
larger or
pipe-
move it
move
to
the
a
pipe
different
out.
location.
Yeah, you gotta get the old pipe out, put the new pipe in.
You would put new pipe in somewhere else and reroute it, you would just leave everything where it is. Because it
Well,
fails because of the soil can no longer absorb the nutrients, and so it's
okay,
saturated.
so that's interesting because this bigger one here overlaps the older one. And kind of this older one here, you can kind of see is this square, and this new one is here.
Could be, it was next to it, yeah.
That's right on top of it. It's overlapping.
I would not be surprised if they didn't dump effluent down that drain, because somebody we talked to, who used to work for Gelman, said he would show up at work and have 60 buckets sitting out for them to dump in a ditch.
Well, the ditch is different. That's the
They were
burn
told, don't
pit.
get caught doing this.
Yeah, right,
But he
but
doesn't want to, he wants to stay anonymous.
more likely they could, when the ponds overflowed,
Right, well, he said when the ponds, yeah, were not working.
when the ponds were overflowing, then sometimes what they would do is route the effluent to spray irrigation or to their, perhaps to their
He said they dug a
the drain
ditch,
field.
and they were told, dump these buckets in the ditch. The ditch was maybe 100 feet long. And they were told, well, it's harmless, it just gets filtered in and it gets decontaminated as it goes down.
So the reason this is interesting is that if you look at the highest bubble at the core, it doesn't start up here at the burn pit. It starts right here at the drain field. That's what I said. Interesting.
Could you say that again? You're saying that the highest detections of dioxane have been found?
According to their map, where their biggest bubble is still at the core, looks like it starts right in the drain field.
By biggest bubble, you mean a dioxane?
Yeah, let me turn everything off and just turn on this one highest concentration. So this would be this one maybe? No, not that one. C3, this one, yeah, right there. So this is 2,000 parts per billion or more according to their latest plume map. Well, it's not the latest, this is actually 2016 plume map, so it's pretty much the same. So it doesn't, I always assume that this, you know, is drawn this way because of the burn pit up here near the water towers. But no, it starts back here where the drain field was. So I think that needs to be looked at. It turns out they were doing borings whenever they put a drain field in to see if the soils are compatible. But of course, this was before anybody sampled for dioxane, so even though the borings were done, there were no soil borings in that location. And in fact, even after the dioxane was discovered, in 1988 and 1998, soils sampling that was in the various areas, we look at those locations, here's all the soil locations. So there might be one that was in the drain field area. But there's nowhere near the density like you see up around the burn pit, up in here.
Well, so is the inference that dioxane was being directly dumped into the drain fields, since that has the highest reading? Or is that an incorrect speculation?
Well, it's only a speculation, because we don't have the data, except for their map. They drew this map without having any other sample points up gradient. The only thing they have here is MW1 and its replacement well.
Pass them back.
No, 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 go ahead.
No, I just think.
Pass them down.
So, this one they had, but they haven't sampled it because, as the note says, well was lost when sewer line went in behind building 5. Turns out there's a sewer line back in here, but there's no recent sampling to establish this part of the plume.
Where the drain fields are.
Were. Yeah. There are some other soil samples here that were done in '88, so, you know, there's no smoking gun here. It's just that very curious that seems to be high concentration for some reason on their map. If we look at MW1, it was shooting up in recent years, and then they thought there was a hole in the casing that was causing this to shoot up. Like dioxane was seeping in from the soils, going down to where the well was screened, and causing these levels to go up. So they put in another well right next to it. Thinking that it's going to be lower. Well, it's even higher. It's also going up. So it's not, there wasn't a hole in the casing. It was just that this is deep enough concentration that came from somewhere. So that's another concern.
Roger, what is that purple shaded area again?
That is the 2016 third quarter map, just where there's 2,000 or more parts per billion in the C3 aquifer. Here's the, I'll turn those on, turn them all back on again here. So it's part of this whole film thing here. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting that the drain field wasn't an issue until it came in the PA attachments. And now it's kind of curious. The other thing that's curious is that that point right around there is also where the deep well, the deep injection well, was located.
Why was that abandoned?
Because it got too expensive to operate, if you believe what's in the newspaper. The statement in the newspaper in 1994.
What's too expensive? What's the cost of?
Well, it turns out the EPA was asking some additional questions in its renewal, because we pointed out to Region 5 that, you know, that's not a hazardous waste deep well, and yet they're putting things down there that should be considered hazardous waste. So when the renewal time came around, I suspect what happened is they asked some more questions, and then the well got too expensive to operate.
How deep was it? How deep down did it go?
That's another interesting thing. In the 1988 complaint, it says it's like 6,000 or 6,100 feet deep. But in the materials that came through, or one step away, I can't remember now if it's actually in there, it says it's about a mile deep.
Yeah, okay.
So there was some discrepancy between how deep the DEQ thought it was and what the actual diagram shows from the schematic that the company provided. So, not that that makes any difference, what's another 500 feet, you know, 800 feet, a mile down, you know. But people in the area were already concerned about the casing leaking. You know, if the casing leaked close to the surface, then you could have some dioxane, really high concentrations of dioxane leaching out to the surrounding soils and aquifers. And we'll never know because the well was plugged and, you know, that's the way it goes. We do know that they had pressure problems because when you do injection, the screens tend to fill up and get clogged. And you have to, you know, just pump harder. You know, so we don't know if there was any fracking going on. You know, it's basically what you're doing is you're basically, you know, if you're into a area that can be fracked, that much pressure, you will cause some fracking. But that was before fracking was even a public issue. Anyway, those two interesting things, the drain fields and the deep well happen to be in that area. So what I've done is I've created a, first of all, the attachments that came through on the PA, they didn't have any date, they weren't in date order. They were just in some random as they got it. It's hard to tell what order it was in. So I took all of those and I put dates on them. Part of the reason maybe they didn't put dates on them is because they didn't have some of the dates. They didn't have enough of the associated documents to say what the dates were. But I did, so I put dates on them all, as near as I can do it. So this is the list of all the attachments. And I went ahead and made a separate PDF of each one, so if anybody's looked at the PA, it came in as one huge PDF, like, I don't know, 350 megabytes or something like that. And that's kind of hard to deal with, you know, scrolling through it. So I made, I put the date on each, kept their title, but just put a date in front, year, month, day, so you can sort it in order and trace through. Because some of these documents relate to each other, you know, like here's something that was promised and then, you know, an item or two later that shows up. So you can actually trace through chronologically what goes on. And then I upload them to Google Drive on Card's Gmail so that we can have a link to them. So this will be available for anybody that wants to peruse the attachments themselves.
Thank you very much for doing all that work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took about a day because I tracked down some of the dates. There's some of these are date ranges, so you know that they show up in a different. They're not quite in order, but all the rest are. And where there wasn't a day of the month, I put like 99 or 00 or something like that. So at least be somewhat in this vicinity. Then I also made a separate PDF of the PA itself because that was only like 5 megabytes out of the 135, so I thought that should be separate. And even down here near the bottom, I even have a link back to this same list. So if you click on this, you get the exact same document. Anyway, so this is a way you can go through and say what happened from this time period to this time period. And what we plan on doing now is taking this, having another list like this to fill in all the documents that should have been in this as attachments. Because we have a whole list we have from the DEQ up till 2013 when they quit doing a list like that. And we also have a list from some other documents like this 1988 U of M School of Natural Resources student project. I think it's like a couple hundred page report, and they have a really good bibliography at the end, which includes some documents that should be in this list. So what we're going to be doing over the next few months is continuing to review. I'm only up through like 1985 on the reviews of these, and then pointing out what other documents should have been in here and sharing those with the EPA in a formal response 3 to 6 months from now. So that's the plan.
Thank you.
And that pretty much takes care of that, but I'm happy to answer any questions people have about it so far.
I think it's great that you started it on behalf of all of us, so thank you.
I can't help myself.
But still, I
There's a
appreciate
disease,
it's
is
good.
that a disease thing?
It's a good,
It's a good disease.
yeah. Well, I think making a response from card is an important task for this group to do.
Yeah. And what I plan to do, anybody that's in this meeting today, you know, it's on the mailing list. If you're not already on, if you didn't get a couple emails from me today, we need to make sure you get added to the, what I call the card core list. How many people do we have on the full card list? 170 or something like that?
Something, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of people.
Yeah.
I don't feel it's right for me to share concerns to everybody if they're not coming to meetings or they're not participating. But people that participate here, I want to be able to share that. So we have a Google group set up called Card Core. And what we intend to do is to keep all the people that are that want to be in the loop, that come to meetings, appraised of here's some communications that you might want to read. And then, because it's in a Google group, you can control how often you see those announcements, those sends. You can see them as they come, or you can get a daily or a weekly summary. You know, if you're concerned about how many emails you're getting per day, you can. And then, of course, you can always go to the group and look at things you might have missed. So
I think what you're saying, if anybody here wants to be added to that more active list.
yeah.
So can they send an email that in the subject line says add to core list?
Well, it
Or
basically is
they add
cardcore at Google Group dot whatever it is. We'll make sure that that's shared too. And if you're not permitted, there's only a handful of people that are permitted to do that without moderation. So anything that a larger group would send, or in the public, it gets moderated. You know, to make sure it's not somebody selling their camper or something like that. So that's a housekeeping item that I'd just as soon farm out, delegate to any takers.
About adding people to Card Core
That and moderating.
and moderating it?
Yeah. Well, adding, you know,
That just takes a minute.
that would be more your and my function.
Right.
But moderating it, you know, because I don't always get an announcement there's right away when there's something being posted. And, you know, to have somebody who's more available to look daily at see if there's anything moderating, get the alerts when there is something waiting to be moderated. So
Jeff Hayner isn't here to defend himself, but I know that he expressed a desire to help. I wonder if maybe we could ask him.
You want to reach out to him?
Sure.
We'll sign him every day.
Yeah.
Or does anybody else here want to moderate?
Yeah.
All right.
The other thing that, so you know, that for redundancy, what two of the non-human members of the Card Core list are the Card Gmail account, the main Gmail account, WCCard at Gmail that owns all of the Google stuff. So that gets that's a member of the Card Core group, so there's like a repository of all the Gmails that get sent to Card Core there as well as in the group. And then I did it for SRSW too because I can, and that's another backup archive of that. So if, you know, we'll have ways to get to the information in the future if somebody needs, you know, to review what were the communications that happened between this time and this time. So if you are not sending to card core, but you would like your email to be like in the card archive, go ahead and add wccard@gmail as a CC or a BCC, and it will go into that archive.
That email address is cardwc@gmail.com.
Is it?
Yes,
Is card WC?
yes.
Oh,
Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah, cardwc@gmail.com. And that's kind of the global Gmail address that Roger and I as secretary are using to consolidate information.
we
So-
don't always send from there, but we'll always CC that, so there's an archive.
So who owns that account?
Card
Right.
WC.
Somebody's has to be.
Right,
The
well, Roger
secondary,
is good.
yeah, right now, for the two-factor authentication, it's my cell phone. Or is it your cell phone?
It's yours.
Okay. And I guess unless somebody really wants to take that over, I should put that in my will or something.
You sell it.
Are we ready to move on to number
Yeah, I think so.
5?
Yeah.
Okay, if you feel comfortable, yeah, feel free to just to stand
Okay,
up or come to the table or whatever you'd like to do.
My name's Elizabeth Collins. I live just near is it the Third Sister Lake that's closest to Jackson?
First sister.
First, thank you. My backyard backs right up to 3365 Jackson Road, which is where the dioxane was discovered on a farmland property. It's 3.8 acres. There are 3 monitoring wells there now, I believe. The city is proposing to change it from single-family residential to a PUD and put a 41,000 square foot 4-story senior apartments, affordable senior apartments, but only 9 of them are affordable. The rest are over $2,500 a month. They're gonna have a commercial kitchen and just a lot, they're concreting the whole area if it goes through. I'm concerned about if they concrete over and seal up these wells, what the implications are and how do we monitor them, where the spread is, and especially since this was the site that it happened. We're surrounded, of course, by Dolph Park and single-family homes. All the other 3 quadrants of Jackson Wagner are all car dealers, industrial. We have now a church with spotlights at night. So our neighborhood has been through quite a lot. I'm getting emotional, I'll try not to, but I want to stop this. And I just didn't know if you guys know how to help.
So your house is like right in here, right?
My property comes right on the corner. I mean,
Down here?
Yeah, I'm right here on this south
Okay.
quadrant. And, 4 stories, it's a huge X shape. Oh, you've got it on there, thanks.
Yeah,
Roger.
this is a mashup
That's, which,
from their
the
work.
loading dock and the commercial dumpsters are right down near the homes. All the other quadrants in the park, they didn't put them there, they put them right near my backyard. So.
And this is the second of 2 plans. The first plan, they
yeah.
were set back a little further.
Yeah, the first
from
plan I
this.
wasn't objection to. I mean, there maybe is a need for senior homes. And they left the woods right around the fence line. Now they're proposing to take down every single tree. There's quite a few very large trees on the area. I'm meeting with the Sierra Club guys too and trying to just reach out to everybody to see what we can do. There's a plot for sale, Swisher, right now on Wagner and West Liberty that's up to 8 acres for sale. It's already zoned. Why can't they go there? I don't know why they have to change the zoning from a residential, but at this point,
Well, if you get enough signatures, you can force them to.
we already have that amount.
Okay, so-
I have almost 90% of our whole, of
For rezoning,
signatures.
that
Yeah.
could make a difference.
And I think I only need 20% for the
Right.
super majority, but, yeah, most everybody's against it. I haven't met anyone that's for it.
There's also a natural features ordinance.
Yeah.
If they're cutting a lot of trees down.
What's that, natural food?
And sometimes it's not, you know,
It is.
yeah, this is in the city, I believe.
Yeah,
It was in the paper,
Yeah.
the other day.
we were annexed when the Gelman thing happened. Most of my neighbors are original owners, a lot of them, that went through that.
And
And
had well water for a long
Yeah.
time.
I have, my well's still right out front, it's covered up.
When did you get city water?
Right, well, a year, they had to boil their water, I think, for up to a year after. I'm not quite sure the year.
Just a guess? 1995?
Yes, probably. I don't know.
Well, boiling isn't gonna help.
No, they had to go to
Dioxane.
doctor appointments, well, to bathe in, they were told you wouldn't boil it to bathe in. They were screened by doctors, they had gag orders, from everything I've heard, it's very stressful for a lot of them right now. And I just didn't know what the yeah, thank you, of concreting on top of these is, or just how the city can just say, oh, these aren't important, when Dan Hamill said they're very important when I spoke to him.
They can leave, you know, like little manholes, we have in our neighborhood.
Well, it's
It's like over a sidewalk.
under the X though,
Yeah.
so, I mean, they're, I guess, gonna seal them off.
Under the buildings?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and this X plan, the two that are actually monitoring wells are not under the buildings, they're
They're the
according to.
third one.
Yeah, this one here is a former house supply well.
That's where they found it, I guess.
Well, this isn't where they found dioxane first. They found dioxane first back in the Third Sister Lake, back here.
Oh.
And then they started doing sampling around the peripheral and found it across the street. And then later on found it down here.
I
as they
heard
went
that
up.
they went to sell this property, and it's been empty ever since, because they went to put it up for sale, and they had the water still part of the sale. And of course, everything crashed then and stopped.
I think that's more recent though. It's gotta be more
Yeah,
recent.
Dan McNell discovered it in 1984, I think,
Yeah.
when he was a student
Okay.
on his own, as a school
Oh,
public health
okay.
student. Liked swimming, and swam, he had a friend over there,
Yeah.
was swimming in the lake, and he saw this
I know.
water coming down the hill, I said, where's that coming from? And it's coming out of Gelman's parking lot. And he was told by one of the faculty members at School of Public Health, this is a special lake, it doesn't have any inlets. And we like, it's,
Yeah.
it's a very special lake. Well, what's a stream coming down? And so that started it all. We still may not have known if he hadn't
Oh
done
my
that.
gosh. Yeah, we swam in there when we were kids.
Vince, was the second or first sister lake that Dan discovered? I can't recall. Third.
First, second, third.
Okay, then I'll do first.
First, excuse me.
So,
And Roger, what's the level of dioxane currently that we set? What level of pollutants is the red zone?
here,
Yeah.
The red well.
well, this one's down to 120, 180, I can't read this.
130 minutes.
130. And then the one that I'm really concerned about is MW30D. Because this is the only one that was deep enough to be in the E aquifer for all those years, and they didn't sample it. You don't see any samples before 2001 because for 7 or 8 years the company didn't sample that well. In 1993 it was already at 3 parts per billion, 3 times what the cleanup standard was then when it was 3 parts per billion cleanup standard. They don't include that data in their current database because it makes somebody look bad, I guess. I don't know. So the company probably just as well get rid of these wells because there's a history to them.
Well, then the city and the company can just do that? I guess they can do whatever they want, they're doing it.
If nobody notices, yeah.
They gotta
But
deal,
now we notice.
they gotta deal with us first.
Well, I'm trying to make a stake too, so trust me, they all.
It's best to
hate
deal
now.
with reality. Here's the reality of what's going on. Here's the company's own plume maps at 85 parts per billion. And the thing that struck me when you look at this in detail is there really is a dearth of wells going out to Evergreen. This is the evergreen plume up here. And I don't know, as a layperson, which way do you think this plume is moving?
I
Red, north?
north to
Yeah.
the river, towards West
Yeah,
Arbor.
well,
Yeah, Arbor.
the company, because they fudge some of the data, like, when I say fudge, like they'll take a sample here and of the shallow well, and then take a sample of the deep well, and they'll average it to put on their map. You know, not the sample of the parts per billion, but the sample of the static water levels. Well, the shallow and the deep are separated there. The deep could be shooting down to a lower, could even be going off to the northwest. So it's important to have enough wells at the right elevation and the right density to know where is this dioxane going to end up. You know, is it, the company's saying, no, it's going to make a right turn and it's going to stay within the prohibition zone, this pink line here, all the way to the river. And there's some holes in their analysis. In particular, this one I think it is, there's a 120S and a 120D, maybe it's 123S. But if you look at these, like this, that can't be, it must be the S one. The concentrations here are shooting up. And then you go out a little bit further, there's another one. And then there's even one closer in here somewhere. But if you look at there's either this well, this pair of well, this pair of wells, there should be an intermediate screened area, because on their well logs you can see that there's a band of gravel or sand in the middle of some clay layers. So it could be that dioxane going here would slip by this well, these monitoring wells. And if it does that, where is it headed? Upstream from Barton Pond, where 85% of the water comes from. So it's important to do a thorough, due diligent monitoring, especially around the peripheral.
As far as CARD is concerned, I'm not sure that CARD has any way to, work towards, stopping this development.
Oh, right.
Maybe some of the members here who are knowledgeable about development issues can talk to it, but I don't think, the well issue is probably not going to be significant. My guess, I don't know.
Well, these, like I was pointing out a minute ago, there's a dearth of monitoring wells in this area. And if we lose 2 or 3 of those without replacement.
But are the significant wells in a parking lot, or are they under the building?
Oh, on the plan?
Proposed building.
Yeah.
It looked to me like it was the old supply well for a house is going to be covered up.
It's either building or parking lot, there's nothing else.
So parking lot, they can still access the well. We have sidewalks where they go right through the sidewalk
Yeah,
into
I see
the
them all
sampling
over.
well, and they have a little cap
My
on a little metal.
neighborhood.
They can unbolt it, take it off, and actually do sampling. So as far as actually getting to a well that's covered, it's doable.
I have a couple questions. One that's not necessarily germane. And that is, what is the level of concentration of dioxane in First Sister Lake? Because I visit Dog Park extensively.
In the lake itself?
In the lake, is it safe to fish out of there? Because I've seen.
There's a lot of people fishing.
It's non-detect.
It's non-detect.
It's non-detect in the First Sister Lake and the Second Sister. There was a time, and Matt can talk more about this, when we found like 22 parts per billion, somebody found 22 parts per billion in the surface.
I mean, we sampled the lake, because the state wasn't, but, yeah, Weber's had it turned out, we were sampling and all of a sudden we had 16 parts per billion, and Weber's had a geothermal open loop,
Air conditioner.
yep, so they were cooling the restaurant by sucking groundwater out, running it through heat exchangers, and then discharging it illegally into the parking lot, which ran under 94 and into First Sister Lake, so.
Because they were in the prohibition zone.
Oh, yeah, so it was a well that Paul had never found, and so the state then stepped in, and Paul, I think, bought Weber's a new HVAC system, but, yeah, so over time, it's gone down.
Okay.
So Matt lives right there.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but Dan has sampled, and we still, the city still goes out. It's changed, I think it's quarterly now, we're.
It was dropped off.
Well, and let me follow up with an additional question here. And then again, I'm new to the process with this in terms of visiting these meetings. I know that Dog Park has considerable elevation compared to towards downtown, and some of the issues we've had concern. I know certainly walk through Dog Park, you have some topography. Could the city put additional monitoring wells in to compensate whatever's potentially lost on the west side of First Sister?
I'm not sure what you're asking. Could the city put in what?
Monitoring wells.
Well, Gelman would do it, but we.
Why do we need more monitoring wells?
Or would, because potentially two may be lost, maybe potential construction?
No, I mean, I think we just need to deal with Dan Hamel on wells. You know, when we rebuilt City Hall, we had wells in a corner, and we told Paul to abandon them because we needed to rebuild the court system, and we found a new place to put wells. So if the state thinks those are good locations, they'll ideally require Paul, and this group can work to either protect them or have new ones installed.
Okay.
And certainly the city, you know, let's say you had to abandon all the wells on that site, which I don't think you probably do, but let's say you did. We would work to use public right-of-way, either, you know, on the north, on Jackson, wherever the state thought it would be appropriate to install additional wells.
Okay. Are there wells in Dog Park currently?
Yes. Yeah, there's wells in the parking lot, on the Wagner side, and there are wells, Roger, zoom in just a minute. They're on, I mean, they're on the map.
So here's First Sister Lake.
Two here, there's one right at the corner,
Mm-hmm.
one, it's actually on this side, it's in the neighbor's garden.
Okay.
So the, basically then, they're saying it's okay to seal these over? Or-
The city
Oh.
doesn't know anything about the wells right now. I mean, the city, the planners don't know anything about the wells other than what I've recently reached out to them and said, you know, there's wells on this property, you ought to know about it. So I don't think the planners have seen anything that show the development and where the wells are.
Okay.
They-
But then if they say.
They do now, but the city typically doesn't have a say about the wells. That's a relation, well, it's a.
But they only know because I was saying something? Otherwise, they're just gonna let people, I mean, is this routine? If someone can just seal over any well, anytime?
The city's not involved in this in any way, like it's only
Permits.
recently the city's in court with the company. For the
Okay,
longest
so-
time, this is between the state and Paul.
Okay, but I mean the developer, when a
Well, the
developer
county-
comes with a plan, I don't
The
get it.
county also keeps close track of wells and well permits. So the county is, you know, involved in the well.
If they're supply wells.
Any wells. The county handles all of them, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but if,
Doesn't
the
matter.
county can't keep Gelman from shutting down the well, they just
No,
want
they
to,
can-
they just want a record that it was shut down. They just
Okay,
put
so
those
build
public-
Like a developer
required
has
to
to
talk
talk to
to Gelman.
Gelman to close a well to, I
Well,
just don't know how this works, I'm just trying to.
so like if I wanted to put a well on your property, on private property, Gelman has to go to you and say, I want to put a well on your property. And you probably say, how much are you going to pay me? So there's a contract between the property owner and Gelman. There's a bunch of these throughout the system. We have tried in the city to, and we told Gelman, don't do any more of these side deals with little old ladies in neighborhoods. Work with us, we'll put them in the right of way, we'll work with the neighbors, we try and not have it like go in right in
Yeah,
front
I
of.
see them all over, yeah.
You know, but they gotta go somewhere, so.
Yeah.
But these are examples of just, it's a private deal between the property, the previous property owner. Whether these guys even know what easements or.
Did they bought it outright? Or is it
No,
just-
it's contingent upon the
Yeah, yeah.
rezone.
Oh, okay, so they, who knows whether the developers even really know about this yet, so.
Yeah.
We'll bring it up on the planning side, but I think the biggest thing is
Probably
bring it
won't.
up to Dan Hamel.
Probably will not stop the development.
Oh, no.
I mean,
Nothing
that's-
stops the development.
I'm just saying,
Arbor.
that, just to kind of put that out there, that, you know, that's something that is probably gonna be handled and
Right.
won't stop it, so.
The zoning may, you know, some of
Well,
Zoning might
You
be.
need to study the zoning in the area. I mean, I think it's a lot of single-family residential in
We're
that
all
area.
residential, and it's zone residential, and the city master plan states that this quadrant of Jackson Road should remain single-family residential. It's in the city's own plan, master plan,
I
which,
just,
because of the lights of the car dealers, I mean, they go extensively into it, if you look on the west side in our little section. But now they don't care. They want to just not even,
No,
it's all about neighborhood, 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 but it's not.
It's not that the city doesn't care, and I'm not, I mean, if you and I owned a piece of property, we legally can walk into City Hall and say, we would like you to rezone it. Whether the city will do it is a different story, and so it's really
Well, maybe
city
they'll rezone
council.
mine, since I'm right near it.
City
And I could build
council
a
has
20-story
to
building.
decide, so I think talking to Chip and Chuck are key to this.
And Chip won't return my calls. I know,
I can't solve that problem,
exactly.
but
I can solve.
your council members are the ones that can help with the.
Chuck has returned my call.
just want
Yes.
to mention that there is a parcel on that Porter Street that is still in Scioto Township. And it is not in the city of Ann Arbor.
Really?
Yes, and it's the parcel where the pump station
Yes.
sits.
Okay,
And that is the pump station where Gelman pumps contaminated water from the Evergreen subdivision over for treatment onto the Gelman site.
okay. I didn't know what that was, thank you.
Yeah, and they recently approached the township, we talked about this previously, for possibly doing some work on the site. That's undefined as of yet. We don't know what's happening with that.
So we're talking about this little building right here.
Yeah,
Also, the master plan to look at, what's the master plan for that location, for that area? And that usually is the guide, but they sometimes veer off. The council ultimately will decide the zoning.
yeah,
If you have enough signatures, they need a supermajority.
yeah.
That's one way to deal with it. It doesn't always work, but might change the outcome. And then we modify that or not doing it.
Thank you, everyone.
When you were discussing shutting down wells, I think one thing that would be really useful is if the county had an ordinance that said, if you're in or near this dioxane contamination, before plugging a well, there should be one final dioxane sample. That didn't happen with the 4 wells, the 4 production wells that the company has. They've plugged those wells without getting, as far as we know, a final sample. never know what the last readings were from those wells. In fact, we won't have any recent readings from those wells. And some of those are deep enough to be in the E aquifer. In the early days, a couple of those, right in here, were double and triple parts per billion, even before MW30D was an issue. That data is only on paper forms. It's not in any of the databases. E-unit contamination, maybe a decade or more before it was discovered east of Wagner, on their own property, in their own well. How does this happen and not raise eyebrows? And now they're plugged. So having an ordinance like that may be something we might want to recommend the county does, because there's other wells that
Sometimes
this could happen to.
Yeah, sometimes they shut the well down because it's broken and hard to get the water or whatever. You know.
Sometimes they say that.
Well, that's possible, yeah.
I have a friend who has a well up here in Evergreen, and for years the companies said was that the homeowner didn't allow them to sample, and the truth was that the company hadn't come in and rehabbed the well. It wasn't used as a supply well anymore, used as a monitoring well, and rather than rehab the well, they just blamed it on the owner. And that was, it's right in here, Clarendon. It was like 200 or 300 parts per billion. My eyes are just not working today. That's not it. That's the one across the street. Here it is. So that was what was happening with the parts per billion before the well had a problem, and they just didn't need to sample it anymore, I guess. Anyway, what's next?
Number 6, Vince, I think these were some of the items that you were hoping we could talk about.
Right. I want to cover the one, I think the most important issue here that I see is that Rita and I talked to this former Gelman employee who was telling us they were straight up illegally dumping behind the site.
He assumes it was illegal.
Pardon?
He assumed it was illegal.
Well, they told him, make sure.
Don't let anybody see you do it.
Don't let anybody see you do it. They said, we always look both ways before we started dumping. And several times while he worked there, and it was over probably a year and a half, several times he would show up at work and they'd have 60 5-gallon drums sitting out next to the doorway. And him and this other guy would be, spending the day dumping those buckets. And they were told not to be seen doing it. So whenever they'd walk out, they'd look both ways. They dumped it into a ditch that was dug for that purpose. He was told, and it went about 100 feet out, and then it branched off in either direction, like a spine. And he was told that don't worry about it, this stuff decomposes, breaks down, nothing to worry about. And he said they would do this typically when the system was having trouble, like Roger said, maybe the ponds were filled up, or there was some other kind of malfunction. So this is, in my opinion, is a clear-cut case of, illegal dumping on Gelman's part. Now, he wants to stay anonymous, and we said we would, do that. And Rita and I both talked to him, so we're witnesses. And we both, he says he has a friend who worked at Gelman that seems to be more open to discussion with the public, and he's supposedly going to contact them. So this happened about a week ago. I would like to write it up and submit it to the EPA. Because I thought, when I talked to Mike Burkhoff at the Sierra Club, he seemed very interested in that situation. You know, soil contamination, illegal dumping was something he was really concerned about, and implied that it would make a difference whether the Superfund would go forward or not. So if we have any other information we could provide in that regard, they would like to have it. And I would hope we could, you know, if we have anything, we could supply it. But,
Question over there.
yeah,
I worked at Gelman in the early 80s. I was director of training. I was there for 6 months. They had the sprinkling system, putting it out on the grass,
right, that was permitted.
and, but there's an overspray
Not
down on the
really.
cars. It would shut down production. They give you a ticket, go get your car washed right away, because it would eat the paint off the
Yeah,
cars.
that's all.
So there's Gene King, who's a rather famous lawyer, lived in the Sunrise? Yeah. Sunward. Some with you. I'm not with you, but you know, that. Sunward.
No, with you. You're right.
Anyway, so she, she described that there'd be a fine misty rain. That the vapor from the sprinkling actually was quite high. That it was shot up, 30 feet in the air. And that there would be this fine mist that would float over their neighborhood. And so she actually, she,
really stank.
15 years ago, she came to me with a map, which I can't seem to find. I never found the map, did I?
So what was
I've looked.
So map of
The
what?
map where she had drawn her neighborhood and houses where people had white blood cell health issues. They weren't all the same, but they all have white blood cells.
This was across the street.
Well, it was in the Lake.
Oh, Lakewood?
Co-housing.
It actually wasn't when she was in Sunward, because that
No, this is-
that
you're
didn't
talking about
exist. It
this
was when she
street
lived
here.
in Lake,
Right here,
Lakeview.
Lakeview.
where the cemetery, yeah.
So it's,
Lakeview.
Yeah, so she lived there with
I
her
was only there for
family.
6 months and I left.
Or it could be over here, because there's the cemetery over here.
We got your name.
So this man, I've actually talked to him for about, various times for about, this neighbor for about 15 years, and the story's always the same. But I do think he's kind of, I think he's vulnerable, and he doesn't want to have his name used. And I think there could be cause. So, I mean, if they just put a slap suit on him, it might really, he might not be able to stand up for it.
Yeah.
So, but he did say, I think it's his cousin actually, so we're trying to kind of encourage him. So he said he would give us this other name, or talk to this other guy, so we know where he lives. It's just a block away. But I've heard the same story for about 12, 15 years now.
So, yeah, I think,
But Vince heard it for the
if
first time.
we have any other information, I think, that we could provide the EPA, it would be, I don't know if EPA realizes this, but they had large sprayers. They're almost like golf course sprayers that were not permitted.
It's like spraying it out on the grass.
But this was supposedly spraying grass, but it was like shooting the spray up, I don't know, 30 feet or something, I don't know.
Nice as long.
I found some discrepancies in the spray irrigation areas.
Did you have D on that?
Do you know there was another spray irrigation area where the drain field was? This shows on one of the attachments. So this shaded area here is one of the spray irrigation areas. It's not where it first started. Where it first started was here. Each one of these is a sprinkler head, according to this 1977 plan. And then they added some more, and then they added some more, and then they added some more. So these are all the sprinkler heads that were planned over the couple-year period there.
So one thing I noticed in the report is that was seen as a shortcoming, was noted as a shortcoming, that the area where this was sprinkled, the sprinkled area, the intended sprinkler area, is completely accessible by anyone who wants to just walk over there
Right now.
right now.
And was this?
Yeah, and they pointed that the contractor said that that was
Well,
a
you can't
concern.
walk on all parts of it because 2 of those are buildings.
But- Well,
Can I show you, Roger?
Right,
There
go
are-
ahead,
I think
show
the
me,
point is, though,
which one were you
if-
talking
I
about?
worked in.
if it exceeds
this
part
building.
201.
The
then
medical
that was
research
that.
building?
This is a new building that they
Right.
just opened.
So obviously, these wellheads got removed before they put the building in.
Parking in here, and this was like a big grassy area over here, and that's where the spraying was going on.
Right,
So people were parking along here, the overspray would come over and it would
Yeah,
shut
go
down
westward.
production.
so you don't know, you weren't there when these sprinklers were put in.
No, no,
I take it out.
that building was, I think, just about completed when I.
This is the surprise to me when I read the EPA documents. I didn't know there was a spray irrigation area here.
Mackenzie had a
Is the
question?
EPA
Yes.
aware of these,
She had a question.
It was more of a comment. I actually went and visited this site recently to take some like preliminary like photographs from where like you're allowed to go to the parking lot and things. But there is nobody there. All of those areas are definitely accessible. I walked around probably the entire property and I assumed somebody come yell at me or something, but nothing happened. There's really no, and I didn't, I guess, know that that was where those irrigation systems had been or anything. There's not really any information on that besides
There's
this.
no fencing, there's no
No.
signage,
We
there's
walk
no
through
Well, keep in
Tributary
mind-
Saginaw Forest all the time. That's-
Keep in mind that these are the split parcels. See these white lines? This was all one Gelman parcel until 3 years ago. And then this got split, these got split and recombined. So this is the church property
That's
now
the
here.
church.
This is 600 South Wagner LLC property, and this is MIHQ. This is the only piece that's still Gelman.
Is that the Paul Corporation's building that's
Right.
there?
Well, it's not Paul anymore. But yeah,
No, but she's right, the name Paul is still on the building.
which building, this one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the treatment building.
So I wonder if the EPA ever got data on these large spray irrigation systems that they use that were, my impression was they were not permitted. They were permitted to use the smaller ones.
They were permitted later. There was time they weren't permitted, and then they got permitted.
But does the EPA have any of that information that we're aware of?
Some of it, because this is where I found this.
Okay.
Now, what's curious is that this is the area that they say the sprinklers were. But I went back and said, you know, that doesn't look right, because in the 1988 complaint, this was the spray irrigation area. It says so right on their document. All right, so either they sprayed this area and we don't have documentation of it. And then there was another document in 1994 that said, well, actually, this was the spray irrigation area. This probably is more close to when you were there, right?
Yeah,
Because it looks like it's behind the building.
yeah.
And then we finally get the one that's in this purplish area here is what the EPA has for the spray irrigation area, along with this. So that, you know, this matches the where the sprinkler heads seemed to be back in 1977-ish period there, before these buildings were built. And of course, if you match up any of these areas with the soil sampling that they did as part of the parcel splits, there's only a handful of soil sample locations that were part of the public available baseline environmental analysis. And those are all at the peripheral.
Roger, what was the intent? Why did they use a sprayer?
Well, they wanted to have sunlight and bacteria break down the dioxane. Because otherwise you have to have
No,
ultraviolet
I
light,
think
you
they
have to pay
were
for it, you know.
Aerosolize it.
Weren't they aerosolizing it?
Like, and
Because once
Yeah, basically they
dioxane
spray it
goes
into the.
into,
right,
evaporates in there,
Right.
then the UV light does break it down, but
Right.
it doesn't evaporate readily.
What doesn't waft across the street into the lungs of kids playing
Right.
outside might
But I
get
thought that
broken
was
down.
the rationale for
Well,
the
but
spray,
that's my question.
but
Were
I
they-
wasn't here. so-
Were they trying to aerosol, make, were
Yeah.
they trying to get it into the atmosphere for dispersion, or were they trying to kill off?
Oh,
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 what?
oh,
Children?
I see what you're saying.
I don't think they're trying to kill anybody, put it in the air and let
No,
the
no,
wind
no.
take it away.
But right, so shooting at 30 feet is aerosolizing,
Yeah.
but that wasn't really what they were supposed to be doing.
Initially.
They were
it was-
supposed to be lawn
Yeah,
irrigating,
yeah.
so I think, so Roger's
Initially.
explanation actually makes more sense.
Yeah,
That-
the idea
that
was that, was what they knew at the time.
Sort of seat of
to
the
kill
pants,
it.
they probably didn't even know. They just sort of said, well, gee, maybe
Well,
you
just,
will.
I mean, why would you advertise? Why would you make it visible?
Well, I think.
No, they did have big sprinklers, and they had small sprinklers, but
Yeah.
they also apparently,
I thought they were like golf course.
yeah, some of them were big,
You know,
yeah, and they would rotate around, some of them were bigger, yeah. But but what you said is that they knew it was dangerous because they told you, go get your car washed.
oh, right.
Oh, they told you to strip your paint off.
So Gene King was saying that, yeah, the spray was towards, they started small, they got really large, and they got these big old jets, and they would spray it way up in the air.
Right.
I forget, 30 feet into the air, and it would just waft into the neighborhood.
Yep.
And she said, they could feel the mist coming down in their neighborhood all the time. when the wind-
I remember driving by there and seeing them being sprayed.
What was the ground cover? Was it grass?
It was grass, and they had to
Green?
mow
Oh,
twice
it's
a
really
week.
green,
Oh, it's very green.
really green.
They had to mow twice a week.
And this
And
guy we talked with, he said, yeah, everybody thought this was a golf course.
Yeah.
It was
yeah, one of the EPA, one of the EPA documents,
I don't know, no, he didn't wear a mask.
You didn't wear a mask when you did it,
I
no?
don't think so.
one of the EPA documents said that it was an internal memo from somebody to Jim Marshall, one of the higher ups there, saying, we're not permitted to let any runoff occur as part of the spraying. And we're required to keep the spray irrigation system operating in good working order. And that's not happened because like we ran over a sprinkler head with a mower and there's a leak over here and there's another one that's bent. And so this was in the EPA stuff that we already have, but there's gotta be more because there's all these discrepancies here.
Well, can I jump in here though, and just ask a question, going back to Vince and Rita's point? Can you admit, how would we accept a document by a person who worked at Gelman that walked their neighborhood? What would be the implications of that? Would we accept something such as this?
It's hearsay, basically.
Exactly.
So what I
No,
think
there's-
we're waiting
well-
for is, I don't know
Wait.
that, I think it's a
So
little premature.
Burkhoff said, when I told him about this gentleman, I hadn't talked to him a lot at that point, this was early on. He said, if you can get him to agree to be interviewed, I'll send someone down there.
But he won't.
And we can, what would they call that? Get a deposition.
He's not gonna do it.
And no, he won't do
was very
that.
clear that he
Would he
did
able
not
to do that
want
in
to.
confidence?
I don't know. We've got
I don't
lawyers
think we
here, I don't
guarantee
know
anything.
what kind of thing, huh?
But he said that
He
he
said that
he has a
he won't
cousin
be
or
able to.
something who will, he thinks.
Yeah,
So
that's
let's just
important
give
to have a
let's give
second
him a
and
couple
third.
weeks more. But I think you're right, I think
What
we
is
need
a
someone's going
hearsay
to go on the
from
record
his
somewhere.
point?
But he's
He
very
did.
vulnerable.
It's
hearsay from yours.
But we have witnesses
Yeah.
Well,
as to.
well, but
I
the
don't
lawyer
know.
has spoken.
You heard what happened to the Washington Post last week, right?
Well, a lot of things happen.
No, what happened when they,
Last
somebody tried to scam them with the story.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we need to be careful about
Oh, we will be.
things like that. And always have 2 or 3 sources.
Well, I think,
Well, I think the reason I bring that up is to see if we have any additional information that we could provide the EPA. I think they are Burkhoff is very interested in soil contamination that's not being addressed by the DEQ. And for him, that was a real linchpin issue for him, and he felt the EPA, because it's not being addressed at all. And I think that to him was I don't know what you call it, a gross mismanagement of the site. So that may, we're still in the process, they didn't throw this out, it's still being evaluated. It's still potentially a Superfund site. And I guess that's the other issue I brought up. Whether the CAR group wants to try and write up benchmarks that we would like to see. He said he's not going to do benchmarks, but there were several comments at the EPA meeting about, don't you think we should have benchmarks? If they don't meet these benchmarks, there should be some repercussion. Consequences. And one option would be for the CAR group to write up some and present them. And maybe over the next, month or two or whatever, we can, new wells contaminated. The new map drawn up that shows 7.2 part per billion. Pumping levels decreased, increased.
How about wells that are more than 7.2 parts per billion?
Yeah, or how about these?
Because we can't even get that yet. That has to be negotiated with.
Yeah, there's some pretty glaring issues I think that we know are important to us. Maybe we can put those into a written form and submit them as potential benchmarks. I don't think we have nothing to lose other than time to do it. But we could draw up probably some pretty basic ones and just add to them later if we want. I don't know.
But you gotta have some authority to bring up, some legal authority to why this should be a benchmark. That's why I said 7.2 is the cleanup standard now. And so far, the DEQ has not been able to get the company to even draw maps where the 7.2 is, let alone clean up to that level.
So a benchmark could be that the company provides this map by this date, and if they fail to do that, what is the consequence?
Well, we don't have any control.
We don't have the authority, we're not saying, we're not writing that letter to the company. What we're doing is we're asking the EPA to include these things in their quarterly report, or whatever it is.
An evaluation.
That we would, this would be something that would assure the community, that would reassure the community that in fact real action is
expected.
What was going to happen? Not more talk. I mean, several politicians stood up at that last meeting and said, we've heard you, and we've heard you, and we've heard you. Lots of talk and no action.
I thought Berghoff made it clear they were not going to provide any benchmarks to them, period.
Absolutely, but at the
there's
same
no harm
point.
asking, but
So you think it's just a stupid idea, because they're not going to do it?
I don't think it's a stupid idea. I think it's, people have the energy and so forth to do it, but he said he wasn't going to do it. The EPA was not going to give them guidelines. We're not going to tell them what data was missing, or how to collect it, or what protocol to use to test it, or virtually anything else.
So what are they going to do? So what's in the quarterly
They're going to
report?
review the information that's submitted to them by DEQ.
And look for trend analysis.
Yes, and look for trend analysis. I mean, it's really depressing, but.
I think
benchmarks
I'm glad to hear your assessment.
I think CARD has had some influence on how this has progressed. There's a lot of examples. The one I know about it is these near surface water tests. That wasn't on anybody's radar. And we suggested that it be done, and it's being done. Now, it's not being done well enough, but at least we got to start.
I'm just saying it wasn't done through the EPA.
I don't know, I think CARD does have some traction in the community, and I think that does carry weight with Dingle and Yosef Rabi and the EPA. And we should exercise it if we have any good reason to. And I think this is potentially one. I'm bringing it up, I'm not saying, I'm going to do it and you all have to go along with it.
No, but maybe if you could make a draft of it and we could look at it at the January meeting. I mean, I don't want to give you extra work to do.
No, I'll do that. I just would like to know if that's even something this group wants to.
It doesn't hurt to consider benchmarks.
Yeah, I think we
It's
could,
worth
I think we
discussing.
should ask, yeah, I
We
should
should
just
discuss.
prepare something to ask.
I would suggest you start a Google Doc that you share with people, comment, so they can view and comment.
Or we just add to it.
View and comment, so they can add their comments to ads, and then you can have at least a start for some brainstorm of what benchmarks might be. And you can start with the 7.2 parts per billion, putting that in place instead of just talking about it.
You mean the map?
The map and the fact that they have to clean up to that, you know.
Well, that has to go through the court at this point.
That's the point.
Why not?
But
Well,
that's a benchmark, is like get that out of the court and then, if the EPA is gonna take over, that they don't have to deal with the court. They have to deal with a different court. Because right now, nothing's happening in the court because the Supreme Court is setting on the decision whether to allow the interveners to intervene. Nothing's gonna happen until the Supreme Court acts.
And then DEQ's not gonna do anything, and they're not gonna answer anything, because they can't tell us, because there might be something in the court.
Yeah, it's still in court.
Yeah.
And a lot of the participants would say that same thing. So it's really, nothing's happening in court. The only thing that's happening is in this room.
No, I
So
know
I would
something's
like to
happening,
just
but
move
not
on
enough.
to Mike's comments about the vice chair, since we're kind of running along time.
Sure.
That's all.
Yeah, I wanted, if we're through about the last one, I wanted to talk about the succession in this card group. When we talked about creating a chair and the vice chair, my memory was that when we were talking about the vice chair, that was the party who was going to be moving into the chair position either in some regular election cycle or at some time in between. And we also then talked about what the chair would do. Some of the most important aspects of it were to be the talking head, essentially, the spokesperson of the party. And so I've been vice chair now over this period of time since we elected officers, and it's become clear to me that I don't have the technical ability to perform the functions of the chair. I mean, I just think that's clear. I think I bring a lot to the group, but none of it is technical expertise about water or toxicology or what is basically the kind of questions that one would have to respond to in a timely way as these issues develop in the press and in the news. And so I just don't think I'm well suited to be chair. Vice chair, I can run a meeting and so forth, but if the goal is to move a succession of people into that position, I'm in the wrong place.
Yeah, but what you can do, you have really good policy ideas
Legal.
and legal background, and you know how to run a meeting, which better than I do. So you could be chair and appoint people to do those other jobs. Really?
I think we need to amend the bylaws to maybe create a spokesperson role, because Roger, you are the only person who can be the spokesperson for this group, like to talk to the press, I think.
Well, I think that's changing some, that people become more knowledgeable. They can make statements of what they know of. And there's enough people know about some things that.
Well, so rather than make the chair be the only spokesperson, then we should change the bylaws so
To
that
appoint
the
another,
chairperson.
but I think
Yeah.
doesn't that already say that in the bylaws, that the chair can appoint people to do certain tasks?
Well, yes, but it does say that the chair is the sole representative to the.
So we can
media, so
amend
need
that
to-
part at
We
least,
need to
right?
change
Right.
that bylaw.
Right.
So, I don't know, would that be enough to make you feel comfortable if we change that part about the sole representative?
It makes me somewhat more comfortable, but not really completely comfortable, honestly.
How about if we up your pay?
Yeah.
We're gonna double it, we're gonna double your pay.
Yeah.
I so move.
Well, it would be good to keep, I don't think anybody could be everything that the chair position is written now, except for Roger, and so.
And not even me.
Yeah, I know.
According to my wife, I can't do all this.
So we need to amend the bylaws no matter what, I think. And so maybe that's something we could vote on at the January meeting. I would love to see you move into the chair role in a natural succession. I don't want to put any pressure on you, but I think that it would be great to have somebody running the meetings, and actually that would free you up to be able to respond to technical things that come up in the meeting.
Yeah, well, I could appoint him to run the meetings
Absolutely.
right now. And then he'd be sure out the door then.
No, I think that would be helpful.
But then we'd have no backup.
Yeah. Anyway, I think it's something we need to talk about, really.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe there are different ways to handle it, but I would just suggest that having someone without the technical expertise at the top means that I'm always, whoever that person is always looking for somebody else to do the most important aspects of the business.
So you're like a mayor then?
Well,
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Yeah,
That's
you
what I
got
do
staff
now.
to do that.
Right.
I think the legal aspect of this situation is pretty significant,
Yeah,
and getting more so by the day.
right.
So that, you know, I wouldn't discount that level of ability, you know, in dealing with, you know, what's coming down the pike.
Well, I
Kinda
guess it doesn't
complicated.
just affect, I'm sorry, Vince,
Go
I
ahead.
interrupted you. It doesn't just affect you. If we want to keep a succession of people in the board, we're all going to be in the same boat of not
That's true,
being.
yeah.
So we do need to think long-term about keeping people moving through the roles, because I think that would be healthy. So, I don't, yeah, I don't know.
Somebody's leaving so they don't get appointed here. He's just going to the bathroom, that's it.
Yeah. Well, it was on for discussion item, we've discussed it, I guess we'll continue discussing it in January.
I would welcome any inputs as to what sub-roles are lacking or need to be delegated. Or, you know, if there's something new coming up that we have to deal with, to be able to have volunteers jump on it and focus on that. I think, you know, so if any of the new people have interest in certain areas that you think isn't being addressed enough by CART, I'd welcome any inputs on that.
Going back to where we were before, I wanted to say, I called Mike and talked to him, and I think we need to make it work for him to stay as vice chair.
Right.
Make some adjustments that work for you, because you have history with this group and you have knowledge, and I think that makes a huge difference.
Absolutely, right.
Right now especially.
Plus, he's one of the principals, you know.
Got most to gain, all that money.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, one of the things I guess we could do to help everybody out is to make sure the lines of communication stay open. So when there's a discussion, that we reach out a little bit more to share things that are current. And my dilemma is, how much should I share when? Because I don't want to overwhelm people.
You see, I don't have that problem, because I don't know anything.
But I was thinking, you know, if you're gonna learn everything that I know, so we have to have our dioxane university
Yeah, right.
class, you know, a couple times a week. Yeah.
Well, what if I proposed a revision to the bylaws and sent it to the group, and then
Sounds good.
we can vote on it at the next, okay.
Maybe you should review the bylaws
Yeah, well,
and see if there's any other little wrinkle in there that you need to tweak somehow. All right.
So Roger, do you have requests?
Yeah, turns out, you know, SRSW was formed as a 501c3 in 1995, and we've been working on minimal budget, except for the years that we joined the contested case, because the city and the county couldn't join fast enough. That's when the company wanted to dump 60 or 100 parts per billion into the creek. And because they contested the permit like in the last week in the period, and SRSW over that weekend was able to come up with enough wherewithal to join the case and hold the line until the second contested case got merged with it, and then the city and the county came in with the big box. So that was a major contribution that took some money. We raised some funds back then. But the rest of the time, we're on minimal budget. We don't have big expenses. You know, we have to buy a renew the URL every year for srsw.org. You know, pay fees to be at the Earth Day, Green Fair, and sometimes the Huron River Watershed, Huron River Day, and maybe a few other things like that. And once in a while, we'd make copies of things, although I didn't even do that for the Saddle Hills had their annual meeting at the township next door last night, and they were thinking, well, can you make some color copies of some things? And I went to Staples, and color copies are like 51 cents a piece. I said, I'm not going to do that. You know, you could look at it online. So we've been working with very minimal money, and it turns out that's hurting us, because we'll get a donation of $100 out of the blue, and the IRS says, well, unless you have a bunch of people contributing $200, you're a foundation in that situation. We don't want to be a foundation. So we're having an outreach right now for a whole bunch of small donors to give $5 or $10. So when somebody contributes $100, we're not in the IRS's bad side. I mean,
Yeah.
and since we are, since SRSW, all the stuff I do, and some others, provide the aggregation of all the information that we can get our hands on as a resource to the community, to CARD, and to other, even to the DEQ in some cases, and to the local governments in a lot of cases. We really want to, you know, keep SRSW going at that until we can transfer some of those functions over to a similar CARD entity once CARD is more formalized than even what it is now. So I'm asking you to go to srsw.org, click on the donate button, and send your $5 or $10. Do not send $200.
Now that'll be an unusual.
Because then we'll have to get another.
Roger, can I write a check right now?
Send your donation to Roger.
That's it?
Right now?
You can, and you can drop it off to David Neal's house. Where do you live?
You can't take his
Better
check?
do it on.
I could take it. Yeah. Make it out to
I'll take it,
Cyrus.
you don't take it, I'll take it.
And put it in with yours, right? Yeah, that's fine. Because right now, we can only do it by mail. It goes to, our post office box is actually in Dexter, because that was what was available at the time. Thinking about setting up a PayPal account, if there's enough interest in that. But let's see what kind of response we get.
What's your donate button do?
It takes you to a page.
And you're supposed to mail a check.
Oh, and ask you to mail a check?
Yeah, mail check.
Oh, okay, not PayPal.
Not yet.
No.
So I make this,
Because, you know, we lose a little bit of money when we do
SRSW.
that. Not everybody has PayPal. So.
So I wonder if the county and the township have some funds that they could contribute.
But again,
No, you don't want that?
no.
Too much money?
No, because then we'll have to match
Multiple
that.
small-
You know, more than that, we have to double match that, see, so we don't want that. Now, the city, the entities could do that through CARD if there was a mechanism for CARD to handle money. Maybe Bryce, you could think about something, how to make that.
He would do the accounting.
You know, because right now, we don't have a way for CARD to pay, you know, there's no checking account, there's no money in and out, it's all donated time. It's staff time, it's citizen time.
Well, when we formed the board, Bryce did suggest that the township would handle the funding, or the money handling.
Right, but
Through their-
we want to make sure that we're not in any, I mean, we're not an official authority, you know, so we got to make sure that before we do that, that we have all our ducks in order, that we're not, you don't have to pull the money back and, you know, we don't want to be in any, And you guys know more about that than I do, so. How to make,
Not really. I know how to tax money, how to collect it.
and maybe that's what we have to do, you know, take the next step and make CARD an, quote, an authority that's,
Well, do we need to be a 501(c)(3)?
well, it wouldn't be that, so but you could do it that way.
You're already a 501c3.
But then you got the same problems, we're already a 501c3, but
Oh, yeah.
that's SRSW, but that's a different entity than what CARD would be,
The card group is not 501(c)(3),
501c3.
3, whatever.
Yeah.
Not that either.
No, and it wouldn't be because it's got government participation. So it'd be a different kind of 501.
So if we got a donation, like Bryce had said, maybe a business would like to donate at some point or whatever, we could take those donations? So,
You sure about that?
This is what I'm sure of. I'm sure that if we put a marketing plan together,
so I'm trying to find
and
out.
I'm sure that if we had a good message, I'm sure that there's quite a few businesses up and down Jackson Road that would contribute. And if we had to, for IRS rules, say you have to limit your check to X number of dollars, I don't think they're gonna have a problem. I mean, we ran that exercise for a different program in the township and were mightily surprised by the reaction from businesses. So we have businesses who want to support those things that are important, not to the township, to the area. Now, we can't manage your money as Scioto Township. All I said is we would find a human being to take care of that. Because there's a whole host of things we get into if it comes anywhere near our accounts. But we can find somebody to
So would it be,
add and subtract.
would it be viable for a card to take in funds? Or is that ill-advised?
It's viable. It's only practical if you put together a budget. It's only practical because, you know, I'm like so I ask for money all the time for different things, but I'm like the guy who says, well, what are you gonna use it for? So put together a budget, which we had talked about early on, which was supposed to come in the form of, you know, Jenny had worked on it. We were going to ask the local governments to reauthorize their resolution, and within that, we were going to ask for $250 or $500 a year, which was just seed money when it came. So I think it got stuck with, I think it got put on the back burner with, because Jennifer had taken it quite far along. I think it sitting on some attorney's desk someplace. But yeah, I mean, started simple, but you got to have a budget. And when we were talking about budgets, we were talking about websites, we were talking about organizing your material.
Right. I don't like to transfer a lot of the SRSW material over to a CARD entity site.
If anything, again, taking advantage of the marketing opportunities, with the recent focused visibility of this issue among the different communities, we have a great opportunity to tap into
So what
resources.
would we put their name on their name on our websites as sponsors, or, I mean, how would that work? You can't give them advertising or whatever.
You know, that's important, but let's go down the line. Let's get a budget. Start with the budget, we'll figure out those details later. I don't think they're looking for recognition. I don't think they're looking for a tax write-off. We're not talking sizable monies here that, you know, $200 out of Varsity Ford is not going to make a difference on their tax bill. Just get a budget and let's figure out what it looks like. We have, you know, we do a budget, we have to collect $5,000 a year. Okay, then it becomes easy, guys. It's easy to collect $5,000 a year if we've got the reason and the message.
You know, at some point, we actually might have paid staff someplace down the road. And that's where that would...
That's where your nonprofit status would work. At the same time, we'd want to look at, Mike and I and Kathy and I and Matt and I can talk about. I mean, that's where I would think the locals might want to.
Is there anything the county does? Is there anything the county does that's kind of under, has an umbrella type organization that's anything similar?
I would defer to the commissioner.
Thank you so much.
I'm not.
I'm just, I think, so the Food Policy Council is actually tackling these same kinds of issues right now, because they're a similar kind of entity, and they're talking about what kind of status they want. The answer is, I don't really think so. But it's an issue that's coming up with other organizations, so.
Yeah, our auditors rip us apart with stuff like this. We have to be careful about how we do that.
There may be models working under another nonprofit. You know, I know there's a place in California called the Tides Foundation, and this network, city sustainability directors, we have a $2 million budget and don't exist legally. We're a subsidiary of Global Philanthropy Partners in Chicago. They manage all our money. You know, we're going to be a 501c3 at this point, but so I don't know whether the Watershed Council, Ecology Centers, somebody like that might be able to kind of take you under their wing as a subsidiary.
Ecology Center.
You know,
They've got a
well, the
broader-
Watershed Council just with
Broader reach.
their mission, and they also have certain legal authority, I think. Aren't they don't they have some standing in the state? Because they talk about it as being one of the oldest, the HRWC is the oldest watershed council in the state. But anyway, I think that's a conversation we might want to have with Mike and Laura and just see what, you know, what they say to that.
Well, and I think that this kind of discussion is important when we're talking about rewriting or amending the bylaws with respect to the job of different officers. I mean, that, we don't need a technical expert at the top of the pile. We need somebody who can run a meeting, can, you know, facilitate work that's got to be done or get the work done and manage the business portion of. I mean, there definitely needs to be a business portion here, and that's what we haven't tackled.
One of the options too is to use the university resources, hire interns or volunteer interns for summer projects and things like that, to do some things that we don't have time to do. And well, once we get through this EPA thing, I think we're going to have a good base of information that anybody can take, especially with the notes and comments that we put in everything, to understand what are the issues going forward. And it's just a matter of keeping up with new developments and adding to the repository. So this next several months is going to be consolidating all this stuff and documenting and putting it in a shareable form and getting it to the EPA and then keeping people informed, not just in CART, but in the general community.
Roger, how do you want to control that data transmission? I mean, would we just give Burkhoff access to the document drive?
Probably.
Could we do that?
Because, you know, you can take a snapshot of it, but then as we get, there'll always be adjustments to it. New things will pop up, and we'll add into it. One thing leads to another. You know, when I was going through this, I was saying, well, here's a reference that there should be a document for it. We haven't found the document yet. So sometime after we share it, we may find that document. Then we want to let him know that, by the way, we filled this other hole. You need to go back and look at this other document.
By the way, Harry Cross dropped off a document you gave me years ago.
Harry Cross?
I just wanted to say that so you'd remind me before I forget.
Oh, Harry Cross, okay.
Not the Harry Cross, Harry Cross, the resident.
Right. Yeah.
That's too bad we couldn't share one server, so everybody could have this access to the data simultaneously. Well, so that you wouldn't have multiple copies all over the place that change, you know.
Well, that's what I'm doing. I'm putting everything on Google Drive.
I'm just saying, if EPA wanted access to the data, they could take a snapshot, or they could share.
Well, they go right to the Google Drive if they want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, it's after 8, so are we paying all the officers overtime?
Oh, good one. All right, is that
Time
it?
to adjourn?
Yeah, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Next meeting is January
It's
9th.
January 9th, that's the second Tuesday, because Kristen and I figured that January 2nd, nobody's gonna wanna come to a card meeting.
You think?
That's our SIO board meeting.
The 9th?
The ninth,
Okay,
yeah,
maybe
second
we should
Tuesday.
refigure that then, because we need you.
Shannon, I'll be there, I just won't be sober, yeah.
No, that's a daytime?
No, that's a nighttime meeting.
Yeah, it's from 6 to 8.
Okay.
Yeah, all right, so we have a conflict with SIO, then I guess maybe you and I can brainstorm about what you're doing then.
Wednesday.
Because, yeah, we need to have you here.
We'll have a earlier meeting so they can go right into this.
That's what we did before.
Did it before, and it worked.
It was okay before.
Was it working out like 5 to 7 instead of 6 to 8?
And we just left
I
early.
think it was 5:30, but yeah, either way, we left early.
Okay, should we try that then? All right,
fine.
that's a simple solution?
Yeah.
Okay, 5:30 to 7:30 then? Okay.
And we'll leave early, Miss Hughes.
Okay.